Testing. Testing. Good morning. We're going to get started in less than 1 minute, so please take your seats. Grab some coffee, get comfortable. Grab some orange juice and a muffin. There you go, Robin. If you haven't signed in, please sign in the back. Wow, that's amazing. Good morning, everyone. Ashley, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. There we go. I need the gavel, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everybody. I'm Tim Maslow. I'm the Director of Community and Economic Development for the City of Groveland. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Thank you all for being here. You could have picked a lot of other things to do, and yet you decided to be a part of Groveland's future. If you haven't signed in, please sign in the back. Lisa Cortese in the back, raise your hand if you can. Last I heard just about a minute ago, we had only 5 signatures, and I'm counting probably a few more people than 5. But good to see you. We're here today, again, to talk about the city's comprehensive plan update. We've had a couple of public meetings before just to get some feedback, and we had another meeting very similar to this held with our city council, our planning and zoning board, our strategic planning committee, our city's parks board, also referred to as the recreation advisory committee. Just about every advisory board or committee in the city council, of course, is included in this. I don't know of any other meetings that we've had or any other topics that has brought this kind of a diverse group together before. But then again, extremely appreciative and thankful for everybody's time today. I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of those habits is thinking with the end in mind. And if you look at our city's strategic plan, one of our 5 core values is intentionality. Today is all about intentionality. We're working on addressing City of Groveland's feedback on what we want to become in 10 to 20 years, and then making sure that our comp plan, which is made up of our policies, our levels of service, are aligned with that vision. Alignment is key. Alignment should be the word of the year for the City of Groveland, perhaps. I want to introduce our mayor and city council members. If you all could stand up. Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here. Vice Mayor Gaines, thank you. Without their leadership, these types of meetings and these types of efforts wouldn't be possible. I also want to recognize our city manager, Mr. Hine. Thank you for being here. Our P&Z chair, Zach Decker. Thanks again for being here. All of our P&Z members. Pastor Tony McCoy, who's also our strategic planning committee chair. Thank you so much for being here. And just anybody who's in the audience, again, you could have picked anything to do today, and you decided to be here with us, and we're thankful for that. I also want to introduce Carla and Sal from Will Dan. They're our consultant team. They're really the stars of the show today. I'm going to be quiet at this point, unless Carla says there's anything else I should say, but I'm going to pass the baton to her, and she's going to give a presentation. She's going to address most of the feedback that we've received in the previous public meetings, and then share some ideas with you all today in terms of what some of the next steps, what some of those policy changes could be, again, to make sure that we're aligned with our strategic vision as a city. So, Carla, here you go. Thanks.
Thank you for the great introduction, Tim, and good morning. It's a beautiful day in Groveland. It's great to be back. I look forward to our discussion today. We've been here now a few times, and the process has gone forward with this important work that Tim alluded to. Again, I'm Carla Ebenbach. I'm with the Wildan consultant team working on the evaluation and appraisal review. And I just want to thank the leaders who are here, spending their time to participate in this briefing, as well as the staff that I've worked with closely now for months on this process. There's a lot of hard work going into this, and it's a group project. So thank you to all. Let's see. This will work in a second, I'm sure. I'm getting a, okay. Oh, back. Okay, so the agenda for today. The first three items there, the project progress report, talking about our peer communities and best practices, and some of our draft policy recommendations, that's really the meat of my presentation. It'll be about 25 or 30 minutes, which will leave plenty of time for discussion and feedback with you all. And so I look forward to that especially, and I hope that we'll have a very meaningful discussion to follow. So I'm going to jump to the punchline. I include this slide because it kind of tells you what I'm going to tell you. These are some of the takeaways we're going to arrive at in the presentation, and you'll see this slide again later. I also love this slide because of all the smiling faces. I'm pretty sure that was a moment when everybody was chuckling at something the mayor had said, so everybody was quite happy and jolly. So while we're smiling, let's also remember why we're here. The purpose is to guide the future of the city, and we have important work to do. So the evaluation and appraisal review project began with phase 1 and phase 2, which are now complete. That was sort of the mobilization and the gathering of inputs stage of it. Now we're really into drafting the recommendations and the final language that we hopefully will put through the public hearing process. This is a little bit more of a finer grain on that about where we've been. You know, we've had a series of community events and leadership interviews, reviews of all kinds of documents and master plans in the city, conducting a public survey, which has just concluded, and a creation of a story map on the city website, an existing conditions analysis, and drafting some of the preliminary policy language. That's all still a bit in work in the process. Today, we're vetting these ideas with you and getting your feedback and engaging with the community one more time. So next will be a lot of hard work on those draft analysis documents and the draft comprehensive plan amendments. And we look forward to potentially going through the public hearing process, giving planning and zoning plenty of time to receive and review the draft amendments by meeting with them twice, we hope. First in early March, and then having them hopefully make a determination by their April 2nd meeting. After which we would go to City Council for a first reading on April 20th, which is just 3 days outside of our scope, but we feel that that extra 3 days is well spent to allow that process with planning and zoning. And then hopefully second reading in May. So just to go back to the community engagement piece, we had various ways of engaging with the community, and today is another one of them. We've had 5 public events with lots of added features. We had books given away, seeds. We kicked off our survey. We had a game you could play with capital investments and all sorts of other fun things. We created a story map, as I said, on the website where we also launched the survey. And the survey closed on the 15th. We had 159 responses. Only 5 were in Spanish, but basically it was open for quite a long time, and you can view the results either by going to that QR code, or when you go to the city's website, you can click on the the evaluation and appraisal review link, and you'll get to those survey results. So the other piece that has been happening concurrently is all of the review of existing documents and working with staff and leaders to gather their input and direction. Clearly, there's a lot of planning already going on in the form of the strategic plan, the utilities master plans that are in place, the parks and recreation master plan. There's a lot to look at, the vulnerability assessment. The city is already engaged in a lot of work, and the idea of the comp plan is to gather that all up and make one guiding document for all. So in that process, well, let me just go back one second. So I did want to just touch on the fact that while all this great planning is going on, one of the clear conclusions is that growth is very much stressing the infrastructure and services of the city, or potentially will in the future. So right now, policy and procedure is what's needed to make sure that infrastructure development and the services that the city provide are well matched with new development as it occurs. And this is the role of the comprehensive plan. This sets the stage for future regulation, for future programs, and so it's an excellent time to lay that framework down. So one step in creating that framework is a slight reorganization of the comprehensive plan as it exists now. It's not a huge change, but it's some reorganization of the components of it, or the elements, into these new 11 chapters or elements, if you will. It includes a few new things, a new introduction. It will include a new section on information technology, new section on code enforcement, and a new property rights element, which is required by state statute. The reorganization piece is really to do with the infrastructure versus services. So we've put some of the utilities together under utilities, a renamed chapter, and we've put some of the services or soft side of what government does for the community under public safety and services. And that reorganized outline is also on the last page of your handout that you have for those at the table. So now we can get into sort of the content of what you came here for. We can look at how Groveland is doing and how we've compared with other communities. We can look at the population projections to see that Groveland is clearly in the midst of a growth cycle. Now, these kinds of cycles have occurred in your peer communities. We have Claremont, Ocoee, and Port Orange up there as point of comparison. They may have had their growth cycles a little bit in the past, and that's cooling off. It's not a level of growth that is expected to be ongoing, but it is something that the city is contending with now. And we have only there a range, you might not be able to see it too well, at the top for 2045. 2045, by the way, is roughly the time frame of this plan. We are required by state statute to plan for the next 10 years and the next 20 years. So that's why we look out about that far, 2045, 2050. And right now we're doing some comparisons of different methodology that we've used to project populations, but we know that the high end of population projection using traditional methods from the American Community Survey and Bieber will land us somewhere in the area of 32 to 36,000 people in 2045, and that is a big jump from where we are now. And just to compare that to 2010, when the population was only 8,700 people, that's rapid change. That's change that's a little hard to keep up with. And other communities have experienced similar phenomena. With that comes certain implications for the affordability of housing. As you can see below, based on those rough figures that we have, we're estimating that there are approximately 1,700 cost-burdened households in Groveland now. And with that growth, probably we'll need an additional 650 new affordable housing opportunities by the time 2045 rolls around. So that's something that needs to be baked into how we grow. How do we also make sure that affordability is a priority in the way we develop, the way the land development regulations are written, et cetera. So this is based on sort of the traditional methodology that's used in comprehensive planning. But I did want to share something else with you. This is the way that the utilities folks plan. They look at different criteria, and I think it's important to share with you. They're trying to keep up with the needs for infrastructure. And so they look at entitlements across the city, they look at the status of development, what's been approved, what capacity has been reserved, and any remaining commitments that may move forward in the next 20 years. They're looking at sort of the moving parts on the ground, and that's a little bit of a different approach. On the right there is a population projection that they created based on some of this information. It's a little bit different than what we have from ours, but it's enough to show you that that high end, which we're forecasting for at least the next half of this planning period, is, it's likely that they also find that there are enough homes planned to be built in the next 5 to 10 years to reach the high scenario. So that kind of confirms what we're thinking, that we're looking at the high growth scenario for good reason, because it's very likely in the next 5 to 10 years. So again, we'll do a little bit more looking at the comparisons with our peers in terms of level of service and impact fee programs that they have. These are two ways to measure how we're doing and what we're doing about it. And in the packet you received by email last week, you probably saw some of this, and this is just a sampling of that. It's not all of it. But anyway, here we do see that Groveland does have impact fees for water and wastewater, and its level of service is on a par with other communities. And it should be regularly reevaluated to make sure that it is in keeping. And it's important because we need to constantly be reviewing where we are with this population growth and where we are with these factors, because as the utilities folks point out to me, we have a consumptive water use permit. We have the need for funding to support these growth-related needs. We have to adjust our impact fees and our utility rates to be appropriate based on all this information. Here's another sample from that comparison. This is about parks and recreation. Groveland does have a nominal, wait, hold on a second. No, we're looking first at, I got thrown off. Okay. We do have a parks and recreation impact fee, but one thing I will note is that what we don't have is a qualitative level of service measure, namely to do with distance from parks, accessibility of parks to all residents. And so I especially want to point out Claremont in this case. Claremont does have a qualitative level of service measure, and they also require 10 acres per 1,000 residents. And so that's just our neighbor to the east, and it's worthwhile seeing what they're doing. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that one aspect of preparing for growth and for the future is municipal staffing. And there's a very helpful resource out there at the Florida League of Cities, which provides standards which are appropriate to the Florida context in different areas of municipal staffing. And so we used that as a guideline to examine, and you'll see later, examine against how Groveland is doing. Generally, the Florida League recommends that in order to provide a high level of service, you would be at the higher end of the range that they provide there. So you might not be able to see that too well, but for example, in public safety, they recommend 1.8 to 2.5 sworn officers per 1,000 residents. Another example would be community development, 1 full-time employee per 1,000 to 1,500 active permits. Parks, 1 full-time employee per 8 to 12 acres maintained. So these are standards that we can look at to see how are we doing and where might we need to put our emphasis in future hiring. And I bring that up, this is even harder to see, isn't it? I bring that up because we looked at whether other communities had a level of service for this or impact fees, and the answer is no. It's not something that is widely done, but Groveland does have a nominal administrative fee that it charges with development, and that's something that could be looked at as a potential means of leveraging future staffing needs. And I also want to say that police and fire services are on a par with these peer communities in Claremont, Ocoee, Port Orange, in terms of the level of service and the fees that are charged for those services. Schools, of course, are controlled by the county. We don't have as much control over that, but that's where those funds come from. So we'll turn a bit to best practices. Best practices for addressing community growth. And there are really 4 areas that I'll touch on. This first one is a proportionate share program. This is something that is a comprehensive approach to reviewing development and aligning it with infrastructure development. And in a place with rapid growth, it's a very wise practice. It's something that's been going on in Port Orange since 2006. That's why I raised Port Orange as an example. And in their proportionate share program, there's a very concrete process to go through that involves steps for concurrency review. They look at those 7 areas of infrastructure below, and if all levels of service in those areas of infrastructure can be maintained with the new development, then it is okay to approve the development. If they cannot, then either something has to be mitigated or the project can't go forward. So it becomes a partnership. There's a determination of mitigation obligation, and then there's a negotiation and the creation of an agreement between the developer and the city, and usually the county as well, to provide for, either with funds or land or construction work, the creation of that, filling of that need. And Port Orange has been able to get $7.2 million as of September 2024 that has gone towards 6 major transportation projects which were long needed, mostly things like interchanges, road extensions, signalization, and in those cases, Volusia County was part of the agreement. So their comp plan formed the basis for this, the legal basis, because it was founded on the idea of a concurrency management system, which is something that the city needs to have in order to justify having a program like this. And it's especially workable because it relates the infrastructure impacts of development to the development itself. And that's why later on in our recommendations, you'll see that I'm asking that Groveland look at establishing a proportionate share program. Next best practice has to do with agricultural protection. This is something that is very near and dear to Groveland. I know now from spending some time here, making sure that the farming land use is protected, is robust, and that the rural character is preserved. So I did look here at Palm Beach County, which, although it's a county and so it's a different scale than the city of Groveland, They've learned many lessons over the years through their agricultural reserve program. It was established all the way back in 1990 based on a master plan that was prepared by Dover Cole. And it involves a series of tiers in the area: urban, exurban, rural, and agricultural. It's about 22,000 acres, and about 10,500 are in agricultural use today. And again, this was based in the comprehensive plan. So it was able to create a transfer of development rights program, which is the essential core of it. And the idea behind that is that there is the land that is being preserved, there is a receiving area where development may occur to the east of the reserve. That's a sort of a partnership with development to say, if you participate in this and we preserve this land, then you can develop X in this other location. And that's why you'll see in our recommendations, we're also asking that the city look at developing a transfer of development rights program for this same purpose. And there are many lessons to be learned. So in the process of considering that, the city should review what the what the county has experienced and learned. They've had difficulties, excuse me. They've had their share of difficulties, no doubt. Maintaining concurrency, competing with other economic development needs, like there's 40% unemployment in the Glades, so there's a lot of pressure to create other types of development in that same area. There have been calls for more workforce housing, more aggregate housing, and to accommodate that and all the services that come with that, that becomes a bit of a tug of war on the political level. The other challenge that they've had is, the commercial lands have been depleted, and so some developers are trying to bring commercial development into industrial areas. So it's not like it's super easy, but it's a model for Groveland. The next best practice I want to touch on is affordable housing. And as I mentioned before, there's affordable housing need now. There will be more affordable housing need in the future in Groveland. And an example I like to point to is West Palm Beach, where there's a really concerted effort to create an incentive-based program to produce affordable housing. On this particular example, it's a stretch of US 1 or Broadway in West Palm Beach that is socioeconomically depressed on one side, a little wealthier on the other side. And they've been able to create a new zoning code which allows bonuses to development for the inclusion of affordable housing. And so while West Palm Beach is a bigger city and they might get to 6 stories if they include certain levels of affordability, Groveland is a different scale. Maybe you have 3 stories or 4 stories at most, but it's the same. The principle is the same. The idea is that you get to develop here and you get this bonus if you include this amount of affordable housing and if you retain these legacy commercial enterprises. So it can be done. But I can't leave this topic without saying that Groveland is already doing amazing things for affordable housing. I learned through my reconnaissance that you already have an affordable housing land trust, something which you could continue to utilize. It was the county's first. You've enabled different forms of missing middle housing, different forms of housing, cottages, duplexes in the T4 and T5 zones. You allow accessory dwelling units. There's no minimum house size required. And there are requirements for a mix of housing types now. So the new developments that you see coming out are going to have some of this more diverse flavor to them in terms of the form that they take and the opportunities that they create for different housing options for people. And some of these different forms and shapes and footprints are a lot more affordable, is the main point of that. Now, the fourth and last best practice I want to point out for Groveland is downtown development or downtown redevelopment. And that is important because as the town grows, as the city grows, there are needs for commercial services. There's needs for civic opportunities. There's a need for placemaking. We have a lot of wonderful new neighborhoods in Groveland, but we need a place that we call Groveland, downtown. And so we looked for this example. It's kind of a no-brainer to look at Winter Garden because Winter Garden has done a fabulous job of reinventing its downtown. And they located their civic facilities in the downtown, and it's well understood that was instrumental in spurring the further redevelopment that occurred there. The new city hall there even shared parking with new businesses, so there's a sense of an enterprise, the city going in, making an investment in the downtown, and then the commercial activity and the investment followed. So there are many reasons to go to Winter Garden, and we'd love for there to be many reasons to come to Groveland, to shop, to eat, to play, to do business. And that's why we have some recommendations along those lines in the documents we've given you. So this brings us back to Groveland. There's so much going on here. There's the strategic planning effort. There's the transect-based code, which puts the right intensity of land development in the right place. There have been these housing code innovations. And vision has emerged from all of this work, and vision has emerged through this comprehensive planning process, through the conversations we've had with the community, with the leaders. And these are some of the things listed there that we have heard that you want. You want to maintain the small town feel that you have. You want to preserve and protect the beautiful and pristine natural resources that you have. You want there to be housing choice. You want to be able to walk safely from one place to another in the community. You want to feel connected as a community. You want a downtown. You want to be able to go out to eat in Groveland, to shop in Groveland. You would like farming to prosper and continue into the future. You would like to see your local economy flourishing, and you would like to see that there's adequate infrastructure and services to serve all residents in the city. That's what we've heard. So the question is, how do we get there? And this is a very dense slide, which I'm not going to read to you, but it's sort of like the highlights of the policy recommendations that we provided to you for this meeting. We need to take a very proactive response to growth, and that starts with policy. And from policy follows regulations and programs and all the things that make it happen. So just to give you a sampling, in the document we provided you, which is simply a draft, it's not in any way final draft language for the comp plan, but these are recommendations to create essentially full cost accounting, which is a concept that is worth taking a minute on. Full cost accounting means looking at all of the things that are needed in a community that new development requires. It's everything from roads to pipes to parks to people working for the city. Full cost accounting is basically the idea behind that proportionate share program idea. It's the idea that we should, at the development review process, be looking at what is needed in the city and how do we maintain that even with this new development. That's a proactive response. So that's a concept I want to leave with you there, but also mention just a few other highlights of this policy recommendation document that you have. The idea to expand your impact fee programs in different areas, such as for mobility, stormwater, conservation, parks, to start developing development phasing guidelines to manage that rollout of development, to create a housing unit entitlement pool, to create a water and wastewater fee overlay district. That's some of the things, to creation of a stormwater utility, which doesn't currently exist. But then other things too. We really believe that civic facilities and investments, especially those that would spark further redevelopment downtown, such as a city hall, should be located downtown. And further, this TDR idea, transfer of development rights for agricultural protection. The creation of a rural transition land use. You can read more about that in your document. And so on and so on. Municipal staffing, traffic concurrency, management database, an enforceable land conservation standard. Something that has teeth. Right now, the city has a goal to preserve 50% of its lands as conservation lands. Well, how do we make sure that that happens? Maybe that's part of that full cost accounting. Maybe that's part of what needs to be considered as development goes forward. And on and on. And just to sort of put a different way of looking at that, what's hoped with these policies that we will develop for the city in your partnership with you is that, starting from left going across, reading left to right, that we will establish full cost accounting for proposed development that is based on level of service, that developments will contribute appropriately to the community, that we will monitor and govern the pace and the process and the outcomes of development, that will work towards our economic development goals, the types of commercial and other activities we want to see coming to the downtown, the increase, the desired increase in health facilities, et cetera, the housing objective. We want to make sure that we protect farming and rural character, protect Groveland's natural resources, that's down on the left, conservation, create safe and walkable connections in the city. That maybe have to be a targeted approach because we can't put sidewalks in the whole city. But there are interim solutions, that's possible to create clay trails in some of the right-of-ways, for example, as a starting point to make the city more walkable for those who you often see walking in the right-of-way. We want to create special public places. We want to create a downtown. So those principles are starting to already be in your code, and those ideas can be enforced by this policy document. Of course, we want to coordinate with the county and the state efforts. That's really important. It creates a lot of opportunity to leverage those resources, but also the city needs to come out strong in the way that it wants to, so that if those ever evaporate, the city is still doing what it thinks is correct. And of course, we want to involve and serve all residents and businesses. That's really key that all voices are heard, and that's why we gave the community engagement effort to this process the name Your Voice, Your Plan. So quickly, level of service guides growth, and so we're suggesting that the full array of public infrastructure and services should be assessed regularly according to level of service standards. And if that occurs, then infrastructure and services will be matched with community needs. It'll support strategic investment in the community. It'll enhance your financial sustainability, accountability, and it'll allow further strategic planning. So here's where we get into a little bit of the details in terms of our recommendations about level of service. These are only recommendations, and what we're hoping for is that we'll have a conversation with you about it. These are based on all of the internal conversations with the different departments at the city, how they currently work, looking at those peer communities and what they're doing. These are open for discussion because we know that some of them they have cost implications or they have implications for the marketplace. But here's where we want to start our conversation. So these are the wet level of service standard recommendations. So these are your things like fire flow, potable water, storm water, wastewater. And you can see in the middle column, the blue, that's what the standard currently is. And on the right is what we're proposing. In some cases, it's just a different way to slice it to be more enforceable. But in some cases, it's adjusted based on actual experience. For example, wastewater. The utilities folks tell us that they base it on 310 gallons per day per equivalent residential unit. So we aligned it with that. These are things we can talk about in the discussion if you have particular thoughts about these level of service recommendations. These are the so-called dry level of service standard recommendations. So it's everything else. Those that I separated these into boxes because of the way that these topics go together. So conservation and parkland are in that top box, and you can see in the blue, of course, our current level of service standard. In the case of conservation and qualitative measures, we don't have one right now. But we're suggesting that 50% total land area of Groveland must be maintained as conservation land at any given time. And Groveland is not quite there yet, but it's almost there. It's very close. We're suggesting bumping up the parkland level of service to 10 acres per 1,000 residents to be on a par with Claremont and other communities. I think Apopka is another one that came up that has 10 acres per 1,000. And we're suggesting to add a qualitative level of service, which means a public or private park would be accessible within a 15-minute walk of every resident. Then moving on to sort of more people services, we're suggesting with the municipal staffing to implement the higher end of the Florida League of Cities benchmarks. That seems to be the standard according to that organization, and so that's what we're recommending. In our conversations with the fire chief, we learned that the current level of service for response time was a little bit unachievable given the rural nature of the roads in Groveland, so we bumped that number up slightly. And otherwise, let's see. Roadways and school facilities I put to themselves because, of course, they're largely controlled by the county or the state. And so we have limited control over those things, except for perhaps funding programs that we go towards to get, there's an FDOT safety grant that can be applied for that could help with some of these right-of-way improvements for pedestrians and bikes. So what we're suggesting here is essentially not much of a change to level of service, but the addition of context-sensitive classifications. And that simply means looking at other qualitative aspects of the transportation framework in the process of deciding if we're meeting level of service. What is next to these roads? What are the environmental features there? What are the land uses? So we're trying to make that a little bit more nuanced. And then just to get into a little detail on this municipal staffing, to the left there is the current organizational chart for Groveland. You certainly can't read that, but there are 188 employees in the city total, and these are in the gray column. It's how they're broken out by department, and then in the green, we compared that with the Florida League standard. And we found that in many cases, Groveland is within the range of what's proposed. In a couple cases, though, a bit on the low side or below. So parks staffing seems to be well below that standard range, and community planning and economic development is either below it or on the low side, depending how you count the employees that fall in that department. There really are only 2 planners on staff, even though it says 10 there. There are only 2 full-time planners, or 3, 2 or 3, from what I understand. So And we'll provide these slides later as well if you want to see the details, but it's based on an estimated current population of 24,600, a certain number of permits open, a certain amount of parkland, et cetera. So based on that, I just want to kind of distill this down to what we are finding to be the top level of service issues through all of this analysis. These are the top 6. So clearly wastewater, from what we understand, is near capacity, and the timing of the creation of new facilities is really tricky because of the entitlements process. It's hard to figure out what to plan to build now, what's been promised, and what can we promise now, what can we not promise now, and perhaps we got a little ahead of ourselves sometimes in the past, so now it's time to align these things better. There's that word alignment again. Stormwater. As I said before, there's no stormwater utility in Groveland as of yet. That's one of our recommendations. And the flooding that occurs in the older parts of the city, downtown, in the older neighborhoods, basically the stormwater infrastructure isn't totally keeping up with current conditions. In terms of the potable water or the water system, the main issue is intermittent pressure. We've heard that at times, different places in the city, there are issues with water pressure. And that's an issue for serving the residents, but it's also an issue for fire flow. The fire department has to have reliable flow of water to deal with emergencies. In terms of parks, you have some wonderful parks, and you have one really huge park. But parks are not accessible to all residents within 15 minutes. That is a very typical standard these days in planning for park access, 15-minute walk. And we'd love to see Groveland achieve that as well. And there are many ways to achieve it. I will say that, in terms of some of these recommendations, you have the ability to create parkland through, active parks, passive parks. There's hope to create conservation-based parks and possibly even agri-parks. There is language in there about that, about creating something that has an educational and cultural component to it, where we integrate, in some locations, park opportunities with agriculture. In terms of the staffing, we recommend, we see that parks and community planning may be below standard. That's something that should be looked at. And in conservation, not quite at that 50% goal, and it's been our observation that the acquisitions in recent years have been limited, and also not actively pursued by the city per se. There's been work on perhaps in other ways, but it's something that the city can be more proactive about and make sure that that goal is met. So we're back to the takeaways. So I just want to remind you that we're here for this purpose of guiding the city, and it's clear from our study here that policy is really critical to managing this growth, and this is the time to institute it. So the city itself can catalyze this change, it can take action, it can make investments that bring Groveland closer to that future that it desires, that it envisions. We have real infrastructure and service constraints, or potential ones for the future, and we have really valuable assets to protect. The farmland, the beautiful lakes, the heritage. And so we hear that from the leaders, we hear that from the community. So I might be beating a dead horse at this point, but these are the big policy issues as far as our team is concerned. Concurrency, making sure the infrastructure and the services match the development that's occurring. Safeguarding farming and character. Leading on the downtown development. Ensuring that there's affordable housing development and conserving nature. So with that, it's time for me to stop talking and to start listening. So the rest of this time that we have in mind is, the idea is that we'll have a discussion with you, the leaders of the city, and you, the public who are here today, that we're going to discuss what do you think about these recommendations, and what other issues should be considered, and what needs to be strengthened further, or what are you squeamish about? I'm hopeful that we will hear all of that, and there's not much of a facilitation beyond that. I just want to open it up now to the leaders at the table to see if you have any immediate feedback for us, questions, anything we can clarify. Happy to talk more about those recommended policies you have in front of you as well. Again, that's just a draft, and it's not yet in the form that it will be ultimately, where we take the existing comprehensive plan and we strike out and we write in, the proposed amendments. This is just sort of distilling the basic new directions that we'd like to propose for the city. So with that, I'd like to open it up. Any comments from anybody at the table?
See if anybody has comments.
Yes, absolutely. Mary Jo looks reluctant, however, so start over here. Somebody's got to go first. It's a lot to chew on, I know, so perfectly understandable if you're still thinking.
We can come back, yeah. Huh?
Can I give it a whirl?
Yeah, please.
So a variety of some great data and some great foundation to look at, and timely as we look at reorganizing and levels of service and get into some discussions about future budgets.
Mike, send in the mic.
Yeah, let's use the mic. This is not a public hearing, but we do want to make sure we hear everybody.
Yeah, so thank you. Some good data. I'll be interested in working with different departments. You know, I've asked for the supplemental slide shown today on levels of services because I think some of the numbers are off, but the idea is great to really evaluate and benchmark against other jurisdictions. I'm curious with the water and wastewater people, 250 gallons per day per ERU versus the 300 and whatever they use for planning. I wonder how St. John's Water Management District will look at that based on our requirements for conservation efforts. We're in the midst of updating our impact fees on non-utilities, because parks. And in the original Parks Master Plan, which needs to be updated, there's not a lot of conversation about open space, trails, and including that in the calculations. So just some kind of random thoughts that we'll be looking at as we update some of those plans, update the impact fees to make sure growth pays for itself and contributes to a high quality of life. But good start. It's, I think for the last 7 or 8 years, every year in the budget, we've increased at least one police officer per year. But we haven't, mostly in the general administrative areas, so that's something we'll be evaluating.
I will just mention that we do have a recommendation in there to include the calculation of trail lands used for trails in recreation in parkland, and also we are still in conversation with the utilities folks to tweak and fine tune these recommendations.
I saw some of Rich's dissertations back to you the last couple nights. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Needs a microphone. If anyone needs a microphone, we have Ashley kind of walking around with a special microphone if one isn't close to you. And then after we're done with comments at the table, we're also going to go to the public and allow everybody to speak as well. So thank you, Ashley. Thanks.
I have a lot of questions, but I thought if we got around the table, they might be answered first. No?
I have some questions.
Ms. Gaines has something.
I heard you talk about the community land trust as well as the what's it called, the middle housing? Missing middle housing. So before I ask my question, can you please define again for me what missing middle housing is?
Missing middle, that's a good question because not everybody knows. And missing middle is a category of housing that has somehow slipped through the cracks in many locations, many communities. And it's sort of the idea of a type of housing that might have existed previously in some places, smaller footprint houses, duplexes, townhouses, the kinds of smaller homes that are more affordable. I'm sure Tim can probably elaborate more because he's the total expert on this.
I'll expand a little bit. So today's financial markets, regulatory markets, it makes it a lot easier to either do a large single-family detached home. Our average square footage last year for permitting, believe it or not, was close to 3,000 square feet. Anytime you add square footage to a home, you're adding more materials, more construction, more impact fees, likely a higher cost. Therefore, it goes up along with the interest rates. There's also the step up from that. If you're renting, it's typically a large-scale multifamily apartment complex. What typically happens is in an area predominantly built with single-family homes, as soon as a larger multifamily apartment project is proposed, folks come out and they say, hey, this doesn't really match the context of our neighborhood. This is way out of scale. This is not what we signed up to live near. And it makes it extremely difficult for builders to build the apartments because of that reason. Missing middle housing is not it's maybe a new term, but it's an older concept. Before builders were able to build these large-scale apartment complexes, builders would typically build a large-scale house, but split it up in either 2 or 4 units. Duplexes, quadruplexes. In some cases, you would have live-work townhomes where you had a ground floor, commercial space less than 1,000 square feet, or and then you had 2 stories above that for the residential unit. When you're walking by, typically in historic neighborhoods, think if you go to Savannah or Charleston or even areas of Orlando or Winter Park around here, you'll walk in a neighborhood and feel like you're surrounded by houses, 1 to 2 story, maybe 3-story townhomes. But you can't really tell the difference between a single-family unit that has 1 door and 1 electric meter versus one that has 2 or maybe even 4 units. It all fits the same scale, and that's the idea that we're trying to do here in Groveland is introducing a lot of high-density apartment complexes. Probably doesn't really pair well with most neighborhoods out here, but when you start introducing concepts like the duplexes, quadruplexes, even accessory dwelling units that we've talked about kind of in the back or above a detached garage, it fits the scale of the neighborhood. It feels welcoming. And when you introduce those smaller unit types that have that scale, because they're smaller, therefore they're typically more affordable. One of the best examples that I could think of, sorry, Carla, for dominating the time here, but I have to throw this out. I've had a house before where I had an accessory dwelling unit above the detached garage. Our mortgage payment at the time, this is over 10 years ago, but was around $1,500 a month. That was a lot for us at that time, but we were able to rent out our accessory dwelling unit to a relative for about $700 a month. So ultimately, our mortgage payment was subsidized. We were only paying less than $1,000 a month, and then we provided another unit for a relative where they were paying less than $1,000 a month in a nice neighborhood. So it's those kind of tweaks that you can make in your code regulations that we have done here in Groveland that a lot of local governments haven't, but it creates a market for small-scale builders, which is also another form of a small business to create these housing units to bring more affordability. So that's the concept of missing middle housing, and We give it a lot of thought here in our planning office, and we hope to see more of it here in the city.
Thank you, Director Tim, for that information. So while Groveland does have bragging rights with the 3 houses for the Community Land Trust, which is more or less affordable housing, it's really not fair to say that the affordable housing is applicable to the missing middle housing right now. It appears that perhaps if you had an ADU or somebody was renting that out, perhaps so. But to say that the middle missing housing, it does not really equal, it does not meet the requirement of the federal definition of affordable housing. Is that right?
I'd say it depends on that unit and what it's being rented out for, yeah.
But right now, we really don't have that, right? It's,
No,
I mean, I think
we
it's
don't
kind
require
of,
that as part of our policy, correct?
I think that it's kind of, like I said, we get bragging rights for the Community Land Trust, no doubt about it, and I'm very happy about that. But then to move along and say that with the
Missing middle.
missing middle housing is affordable, not at this time, because it doesn't meet the definition, the federal definition of the 30% of the federal regulations. I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Zach?
Just to follow up on that, so if I understood that correctly, you're saying, Tim, that it could meet affordable housing, but it does not necessarily. Okay. I had a couple of observations, and I really wish I had the recommendations printed out, or that was at least sent in the email with numbers. So if we could back up a few slides, I want to make sure that what I saw was accurate. Keep going. Yes, right here. So it looks like what is being proposed is for, no, this is not the right chart, but okay, I'll pivot to that chart. The current 250 GPM versus 310 GPM that we're using for the water, obviously, if we're saying each unit is getting 300 or 310 gallons per minute, that's obviously affecting our wastewater calculations. So my question is, are the current models that we have for the city that are telling us we are at or near capacity on wastewater, are we factoring at the 250, or are we factoring that at the 300 or the 310?
250.
It's calculated on the 250.
Yeah, and that would, at least that's all the information I've got. As a chef, I've spent a lot of time on wastewater now, more than I want, but my issue is that we were looking at going down, not going up, comparative to other places within the state. And also, I'm a little confused about adding more gallons for commercial, because commercial, their ERUs are much smaller per footprint than you would ever have in a high-density area. So that's very critical, because we've got plans out there. I wish Mr. Fish, is he Mr. Fish here? That we have plans out there that we won't be able to meet at 310. You know, you're raising it by 25%. And I would really like Mr. Fish to get with you and tell you what we're doing right now.
Yes, we are not finished coordinating with TJ Fish and the utilities consultant on these numbers. I think you have to look at these as very much draft. Mr. Fish, you are here. I don't know if you wanted to say anything, but we will be coordinating further on that. It's not final.
Just remember, what they're asking for is 119 million, is that right, for the one that we're getting ready to build? That's huge, and that doesn't even take into consideration what's on the books for housing. So this is a huge, huge hit to the, if that's correct, we're way, way off on what we're doing.
Yeah. And also there's a tricky aspect of, when you're building a facility, it takes a number of years to actually come online. So how do you match that with development that's coming in proposed?
Yeah, and if I can follow up on that, because I'm a little confused. The 250 GPD is the existing standard, but the 310 calculation is based on what we're experiencing.
But that is exactly the opposite of what I've been told. So one of us is not getting the right information. Okay?
So when we talk about capacity, residual capacity, and concerns about it, it's based on what they're experiencing.
Is Dan Anderson in? He's my translator.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Council, staff, fellow residents. Dan Anderson, 230 Silver Maple Road, a resident of the city. Proud to be a resident of this city. You couldn't pay me $1 million to move back to West Palm Beach. Okay, let me talk about water systems just a little bit. You've got what's called annual average daily flow. And that is, if you take the total gallons demanded over a year and you divide it by 365, that's the annual usage. There is what's called water treatment plant rating. And water treatment plants are rated based on average day. No, it's maximum, I think it's maximum day, if I'm not mistaken. So first of all, you have to make sure that we are looking at apples to apples, that both the 250 gallons per day and the 300 gallons per day are expressed on annual average daily flow. Okay, so that's the first thing that needs to be checked. And right now, I don't know which is the case. But water treatment plants are based on what's called maximum day rating. The other point that I would make, and there was two things that I wanted to say today while I was appearing before you, is regarding impact fees. If those are both expressed on annual average daily flow, then we adopt the 300 gallons per day. That's a 20% increase, if I did the math right in my head. That, in my mind, necessitates the immediate adoption of a 20% increase in the water impact fee. Now, I'm going to get on my high horse here since I have the microphone in my hand, and I'm going to say that impact fees are sacrosanct. When we collect impact fees, we should be collecting 100% of the impact fees by statute or by ordinance and apply those only to the water system and the wastewater system. There should be no negotiation with developers for forgiveness of impact fees with the so-called replacement with tax incremental financing. I don't believe it. I don't think that's going to, the money we collect from the TIF monies will never replace the impact fees. And even if they did, they would have would have to bear interest at the rate of the bonds that are used to finance the water system improvements or the wastewater system improvements. So impact fees are sacrosanct. I'm going to be meeting with staff hopefully here in another week or two and talk about impact fees. I've spoken with our rate consultant, Joe Williams of Raftellus. I used to be a Joe Williams when I was working for 35 years. And so I developed impact fees for our local governmental clients on water and sewer rates. One of the advantages that we have here, and we still need to nail down the details, is that we can apply impact fees, both water and wastewater, to the direct payment of capital projects and also to the debt service on the bonds with the state revolving fund loan. That is a real boon for us to be able to have that flexibility. And so I want to talk with our finance folks about making sure we plan ahead and do the optimal mix of paying directly for projects versus paying debt service on the bonds. So that's my high horse about impact fees. Mayor, I apologize if I've gotten far afield here, but I agree that there is criticality with the water and wastewater system. The other thing that I wanted to advocate for today is probably 4 months ago, you, the city manager, Mr. Mazel, Mr. Fish, and I sat in the City Hall conference room, and we had Rich Niles on meetings or Zoom, whatever it's called. And the power that he had at his fingertips to show tables, charts, and graphs was absolutely amazing. I mean, he was just showing displays of stormwater pipes, you know, graphs of growth, tables of growth. What we really need to have in our updated comprehensive plan is a lot of graphical information. We need to show charts showing growth of population, homes, and then to show the capacity of each of the facilities, the water treatment plants, the wastewater treatment plants. This will make it both more understandable for all of us and all of the other residents of the city. It will also provide transparency. Those graphs, tables, and charts can be updated. They can be shown on our website. So every resident, if they wonder what's going on with the water system and the wastewater system, they can just hop onto our website and see what's the current status. They can be updated quite easily. So those are the items that I wanted to talk about. Mayor, I apologize if I hijacked your question.
That's okay. The charts, remember, he's an engineer. Okay, so charts.
Thank you so much. This is all really good guidance. I love the idea of making the comp plan more graphic. Generally speaking, people respond well to things that are illustrated in different ways besides just words. Any other thoughts on that topic from anybody?
Yes, so since we verged it or went into impact fees a little bit there, how does explain the full cost accounting and how that affects impact fees? And my understanding is that those are linked together.
They would be, and that all would have to be studied and planned out for how that would work exactly. The comp plan will only be at a high level, suggesting a direction for the city. But yes, basically, if the city were to establish some kind of proportionate share program, it would decide what elements, what infrastructure or services would be included under that, what it thinks it could justify under that umbrella, and then it would figure out all the mechanics of how that translates to impact fees. And so the comp plan will not operate at that level, but that would become something that's codified in law. It would be something that is developed and passed by ordinance to be the way that development review is done and the way that infrastructure is created in partnership in the future. So that's more work to be done to make the details clear.
Entertain this in any way until a real, at the very least, one real example of a development that is current and ongoing that already has impact fees assessed, also runs a full cost accounting model, and the city council needs to see exactly nuts and bolts of, okay, this development that went in over here, these were the impact fees. If we had run the full cost accounting model, this is what they would have been. Because if it turns out that these fees are going to skyrocket for developers, there's no growth coming here. So that really needs to be understood in full before this is even entertained. I also want to look at the level of service for fire. Can you go to that slide? Okay, so we're proposing a 60% increase in response time for the fire service. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that math is right.
Okay. And also derating our roadways from a level of service of C and D to D plus. Am I reading that correctly?
Level D, yes. That's based on the recommendation of the city's transportation consultant, who observes that even though it's not, the most optimal, most members of the community will tolerate a level of service D, and so that's something that is not too different than what you have right now.
Well, the goal is to improve.
The goal is to improve.
Right.
Many
So-
of those roadways are out of the city's control. Many of those roadways are out of the city's control, but the addition of context-sensitive classifications will help to advocate for better development around those roadways, and for example, mitigate some of the conflicts that currently exist between some land uses and the roads. So that's establishing that change, but it's not claiming to be able to fix roadways that are under county or state control.
Okay, I'm just saying, this is the very first thing that members of the community feel when their commute to work increases. So we got to do something about that.
Can I just ask for clarification? I'm a little slow. Who sets the C and D? Don't we? We've talked about that. Don't we? We set it, and then they have to go buy it. And so I don't understand what the whole conversation about state and stuff is. If we go down to a D or a D plus, all the C's can be deteriorated. And I don't know who the consultant was, but I don't think anybody in Groveland wants to say we want what we can tolerate.
Okay. Okay. Point well taken. That's why we're here to talk about this, get your feedback.
I think I had another, I wanted to look at the level of service, the wet level of service as well.
Which one?
The chart that was the wet level of service for fire. I may or may not have a comment there. Fire flow.
Yeah.
Can you explain what we mean by adjusting by zone? Because you had mentioned earlier that we're already having issues with good fire flow.
Yeah.
And that sounds to me like we may increase the requirements in some areas and decrease it in others. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, at a minimum, it would mean increasing it in some, because we're talking about serving areas that have varying levels of density according to those zones. So, for example, in the redevelopment downtown, you may have buildings of 2 or 3 stories, and that's going to have a different fire flow need than the very much less dense rural parts of the city. So this is not developed, but it's proposed that we adjust that to be aligned with the varying intensity throughout the city.
Okay. All right. I think those are the comments I have for now. Thank you.
Anybody we haven't heard from?
Can I go?
Let's go around. Barbara, did you?
Okay. Well, I asked one question, but I have another one.
Yeah, go ahead. It's your time.
Okay. What system will be put in place to guarantee the expenditures or the upkeep of the concurrency plan? And question number 1. And number 2, when will we be getting a more, like this is a draft, but I am of the opinion that this is a very ambiguous draft. and I know that, realize that you have to get the input, but when will we have a more definitive draft?
The draft amendments will be written by February 9th, and they will be circulated with municipal staff for a couple of weeks to get their input. And then at that time, once they're vetted in that way and finalized, they'll go to planning and zoning, and we'll have a whole review with them. You may recall I was talking about early March, take that draft to the planning and zoning board for their review and discussion, and then come back in, April 2nd, I think it was. Go back in April to see what their determinations are about it. And then if they recommend with some changes to take it to the council, then we would go next to the council, April 20th. And so you would have that opportunity then to see what has been developed between now and then, and also gone through that planning and zoning review process. And in that time, you'll be seeing it in its form that it is supposed to be for submittal to the state. It would be the existing comprehensive plan with any amendments marked as strike out anything that's being removed, underline anything that is being added. And so you'll be able to see very clearly on paper what's new, what's being taken out, and that's when you will have all the information right in front of you.
The first draft is ready. Not only will it be shared with P&Z, we'll also share that with council, and we'll also post it on our city website for this project so that everybody in the public will have access to that first draft, and we'll start the feedback session.
Will that draft, Tim, will that contain the performance metrics, the timeframes, and the regulatory changes needed?
Yes.
My other question was, what system or process is going to be put into place to guarantee the funds for the concurrency plan?
Well, you're talking about development of the impact fee program?
I'm talking about anything, whether it's impact or what system is going to be put into place to sustain the concurrency plan. I don't know if it's impact, direct, indirect. That's a question that I'm asking because you all are the subject matter experts.
Yeah, so what we're proposing is that the city take up the work of investigating how to design that program, with which we're happy to help, but it's a process of deciding what will be included in it, and then in what ways it makes the most sense to pay for it. And so I know there's currently a fiscal impact analysis going on now, and that work is going to continue in some form, and that will inform how to do it. Those experts will be able to advise on how to set up impact fees, or how to set up the arrangements for legal agreements with developers. Those things are yet to be developed. So the comprehensive plan simply would direct the city to investigate it and pursue it. But those details would be worked out in another stage of this process.
Concurrency relies on the impact fees. This is going to impact the impact fees, so to speak. So the impact fee study is imperative to come in on the heels of the comp plan. You want to make sure that those impact fees align up with the levels of service that the council adopts.
Is it only impact fees that sustains the concurrency plan?
You also have the impact fees are typically, concurrency looks at the capital improvements essentially and making sure that the development pays for that growth. So you want to make sure that the impact fees align with that. It's not necessarily intended for operations or a lot of people ask me if it's going to impact our billing rates if we're existing users on water, and those are two separate things.
Well, what I'm asking is the impact fees the only thing that sustains?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, I think this is one of the reasons the mayor talks about how important this plan is. because it's really the foundation for almost every decision, policy decision, and budget cycle. You hear the most common one is 2.4 officers per thousand, during the budget. Well, how many officers do we have? In each of the war reports, you have all the fire data for the response time. So even though our ISO improved, the chief said 5 minutes isn't a realistic response time. So let's gauge what our real response time is and make sure we maintain that level of service.
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm just wondering if that takes into consideration the new fire station, because $9 million on a new fire station should take that down.
Can you repeat that?
Does that 8
Well-
minutes take into consideration the new fire station that will be on?
No, not necessarily, no.
Yeah, because it's just moving a permanent station from a temporary station. But the point is, so not only through impact fees, development agreements with developers when you have new development, but also annual appropriations and budgets.
That's all I was trying to find out.
Sorry, pardon?
That's all I was trying to find out.
Yeah.
Can we just, because we're talking a lot about impact fees, I'm more about the numbers. Is about $15,000 now for an impact fee on a home?
Water and wastewater.
Wastewater is 13,600 or something. So, and I think it's around 15,000. So when we talk about, I want you to have that in your mind. We talk about raising wastewater 20%. We're not talking about a little bit. When we're talking about all this, and it's not only the developers, it's anybody that's a single-family home. And then we talk about affordable housing. I mean, when you add that with the county, it's astronomical. I mean, you could buy a tiny home for what you can pay just for. So we have to be very good stewards of what our decisions are, because it's going to impact everybody.
Good point. I often refer to comp planning as levers. So we might want a higher levels of service on, say, transportation. That's going to mean X increase likely on the impact fees, but it's also going to impact us on our budget conversation on an annual basis. Same thing with parks. We might look at Claremont and Winter Park and say they have 10 acres per 1,000 residents. We have 6. We want 10 too. It's a great aspiration, but just be prepared. It's going to mean likely higher impact fees, not only for the land, but the total cost, actually looking at the improvements. But then you have to budget, you have to have the staff, and you have to have the maintenance of those parks. So it's, all these things are intertwined. Policy, levels of service, budget, impact fees.
I think that's one reason I'm confused why we would continue to raise impact fees and have a goal of reducing the level of service. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Raise fees, reduce level of service? Is that what you said?
Can you go back to the slide where it has the most,
Done?
Which one?
Hold on.
I'm sorry,
Okay, go ahead.
no. Vice Mayor?
No, go ahead.
Apologize. Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Can you go back to the level of service infrastructure, municipal infrastructure page?
This one or the other one?
It says Groveland's top level of service
Oh, okay.
issues.
This one.
Yes. I'm a meat and potatoes type of guy, D-line. I just need you to just pretty much your recommendation on first things first. And it just seems like we're having a large water issue. So, and we're going with our 5 core values of intentionality and connectivity. I know we're talking about the homes, the missing middle homes, but none of that can be accomplished until we deal with this water issue. So are there ideas? I know the impact fees and those things, and I agree with the gentleman that spoke earlier about not giving these massive corporations impact fees breaks no matter what service they're bringing. But my question is, we looked at our parks and recs, and we saw that we're not where we need to be with that as well. So my thought is that taking care of the water issues with the sewer and what's that say there? Water.
Wastewater,
Yeah,
water.
the stormwater is a big issue. Then you mentioned downtown. It's still being a huge issue now. We would be putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, unless we really dealt with that first. Is there any things that we can do from the state standpoint that could probably help us with some of the offset, some of that, so we're not passing that on to the residents?
That I'm not sure about, but yes, you're absolutely right to identify it as one of the key issues. I mean, it's literally a limiting factor to what can be committed to in terms of new development, because you can't commit capacity in that system unless you have capacity or it's going to be available, and you know that for sure. So you're absolutely right. That's, in a sense, that's priority number one, even though it's not pretty like a park, but it's priority number one because, you know, the city doesn't want to issue any moratoriums or anything like that. I mean, we don't want to get in that situation. So we've got to make sure that we have a plan for that.
Okay, next. Microphone.
Yeah, is that on?
Question about,
Maybe a little
get it
closer.
I have a question about this draft here, property rights. What are you planning on including
Okay.
pertaining to property rights?
Yeah, the state now requires that the comprehensive plan have a property rights element, and all of the plans that I've worked on to date that have included that now, there's sort of a one-page basic format to it. It complies with what the state is asking in that element. It's very basic. It's just assuring that property owners have the right to control what's done with their property, and it's not something that has become very nuanced yet, so there's not a lot of discussion about anything beyond sort of the boilerplate version of that element that's been going into plans. It's sort of checking the box, to be honest, of what's required by the state, but it doesn't have much implication for any of the rest of the plan, to be honest.
Hey, just to be clear, the state is the minimum requirement, right?
Yes,
And
it
I think
is. Could go beyond, yes.
that has been on our list for quite a while, on reviewing that and see if what else applies to Groveland than that one page.
So you'll see that in the draft that comes out, and that would be a good opportunity to see if you want to embellish it in any way.
Does it include anything regarding like HOA and like what's going on with Tallahassee, where they're trying to propose a bill to get rid of like HOAs or more restrictions to HOAs? Does it have anything?
I haven't seen
In
anything like
relation-
that so far, but, you know, we can discuss. We can discuss that.
What about, like on your slide, you had something, I don't remember which one, about economic development. I think for our area, we're like below the threshold.
Was it this one?
No,
This one?
it was near the end. It was like a graph or something. You had something in regards to economic development.
This one? No. No, I don't. It would have been further back then. Oh, that's the wrong direction.
Dan?
I'm not sure what you're thinking. Can you tell me what the issue is that you were wanting to talk about? Maybe that'll help me.
It said something about for Groveland, the economic development, we're like below, I guess, the average. It was one of those charts. I can't.
Maybe in the staffing,
Staffing? Okay.
community and economic development staffing, maybe?
This one, maybe? The Community and Economic Development Department is right there, number 6 on that list. Is that what you meant? When I spoke about that, I noted that based on the number of employees that was given to me from Human Resources for that department, 10, the city is performing basically at the low end of the standard range. But if you actually look at it in terms of the number of actual staff that are doing planning within that 10, it's really only 2 or 3 people. So it's either at the low end of the standard or it's below for planning and economic development.
If they had more staff in, that would help with developing, like,
Absolutely.
businesses.
I mean, just sort of, anecdotally, I happen to know that the planning department doesn't have any administrative staff. So your planners, who are trained professionals to do all of this development review and all of this long-term strategic planning, when it comes time to stuffing envelopes and putting labels on things, that's what they're doing too. So, it's something worth looking at, that your professional staff need to be supported in order to do a good job, especially in a situation where there are larger numbers of developments to review and many more demands on their time.
It's an interesting comment, because I know Maria, and she stuffs envelopes, but where is the conservation person, the water conservation person, all the rest of the people that are up there?
I believe those fall within that 10 as well. It wasn't clear to me in the information I was given, but I'm assuming, since I didn't see a separate category for a conservation staff, that might be there he is over there, the one guy. He'd like to be more than one guy right now.
We can, does the conservation and all the other people that are up there fall into your number there? Andrew and your water conservation person?
Conservation positions under the community and economic development department.
Okay, and where does permitting and building permitting come in that we farmed out? Because if we
that might be in the same category.
That would impact the numbers, definitely. So we plan to go over that with Carla, because those are outsourced.
As Mr. Hine mentioned, maybe we need to
They're
fine-tune that.
contracted,
Yeah.
So, we just move people over into another office and pay them a different way, so I think we need to update that.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is always
There could be some
a
outsourcing
broad brush.
consultants, and
Yeah.
it is a broad brush, and it's a first look at
Yeah.
it, but we'll revise that between now and the first
We
draft.
shall.
Yeah.
While we're on that slide, I have a question about finance. Where'd he go?
Gone. He had to go to another meeting.
Because it says we have 17.5. I was just wondering if that's utility billing and all of those people as well, or is that just,
It is. Yeah.
okay.
Utility
'Cause-
billing, budget, I think procurement's been lumped into that at this point. But the new org chart also just came out.
Yeah, it's on like
Extremely recently, and that
600%
wasn't
higher
shared with
than,
Carla yet.
seems excessive, that's all. If we can shift some of that to some of the areas where we need more people, that'd be great. So I think we have to take a closer look at that and see what actually is entailed in that. Is it just finance, or is it because we have utility billing also, and more specifics?
Very good.
Yeah, point well taken. This is.
Robin?
Let's just use this for, general discussion.
I'm just going to start off with the impact fees. City Manager Hine already said that the Parks and Rec, according to this, the police, the fire rescue, and the admin are all due this year for increases. So it sounded like they're already looking into those things. And are there better options, possibly like Zach mentioned, than, raising it 1,000%? Number one, I'm extremely disappointed in the fact that less than 1% of residents took this survey and gave answers. I mean, that's 150 people. Man, I had more people than that last week at the chorus concert. That's sad as a whole for Groveland. Obviously, that's number one. I have to agree that increase in a call response time, when you just told me that our fire and police are of a higher percentage than average, are a little bothersome, absolutely. What can we do to keep those C ratings instead of going to D plus, I think that was? What can we do quickly to put out a few dollars that might keep us C instead of eliminating Cs altogether on that aspect? It mentions here in Claremont's comparative impact fee program, they break it down, but all adult communities. Does that mean 55 plus community? What exactly is an all adult community that we're comparing to Claremont? Because our wording doesn't have that. So I just don't want to see any discounts for 55 plus situations. I'm bringing that up because I'm not exactly sure what all adult community is. We can talk about that later. I don't want to take anybody's time on that. I also have one more here somewhere. The measures were one of the things for the LOS standards that I had. I saw that Claremont had and no one else did on your comparative. So that was what are options there. And on the 6 acres, can we increase? And you proposed 10 today, but are there other options to that? Because I've noticed that in some places it's a flat acreage, and in other it depends on specifics like Claremont. So maybe there's more that we can look in on that. Pros and cons. And then I had on, could we add city staffing to the LOS standards, which you proposed the high FLC benchmark. So my other two things have to do on the draft portion. Number one, when I first read this for downtown development and placemaking, I consider myself educated, and I had to Google what placemaking was.
Okay, fair enough.
And I was pretty impressed once I found out what the heck it was. It made sense to me. But yeah, placemaking, I had no clue.
I'll just interject to say that we're intending to add a definitions section to the plan that it doesn't currently have, so words like that can be defined.
So, and of course, that all said, you know, coming soon, and we'll have different. Also, for the rural transition land use, why was it 1.5 acres? Why was the minimum lot size 1.5 acres? And is that enough, or is that not enough? You know, tell me why it's right, tell me why it's wrong. And then the other portion in here compared to the last comp plan, and I know that it says that it's coming soon, and I circled it, and of course I can't find it now. It mentions the potential Avalon Park development, including the former train station redevelopment, along with City Hall relocation within downtown, should be planned and implemented in such a way to maximize their capacity to serve as viable anchors and catalysts for further downtown redevelopment. I personally am on board with that. I would love to see everything stay in the heart of downtown. The majority of our historic buildings and our heritage that was mentioned very little is mostly in the heart of downtown or today's current CRA lines. So I'd love to see, I like to see that. And then as far as the safe pedestrian and non-motorized vehicle access to and from the downtown area, it doesn't mention anything about the coast-to-coast trail, which is coming, and that's bigger than us. So I'd like to see that actually added into there as well.
Okay.
In 22 of the draft, it says to create a new historic preservation goal reference defining historical contributing structure as defined in federal and state regulations, policies to prevent the destruction of artifacts in the LDRs. That's something that Alan and I have talked about in the past year pretty greatly. He has some really good ideas, but I'd like to see some more, like Barbara mentioned, I want to see more detail on that as a draft before I start looking at other things, because that could mean a lot of things for us. Structural, historical, special grants, and everything in between. So those were my main takeaways. And like I said, I was pretty disappointed not to see more things on the historical aspect in greater detail like it was on the last comp plan for reuse, not just redevelopment, but for
That can be
purposes.
expanded further. And thank you for all of your thoughtful comments and review of everything. Are there any of those particular questions you want to discuss here?
I just knew we were running out of time, so I wanted to throw everything out there at once, sorry.
Many of those things that you see in the draft are simply that, they're draft. Like, for example, the 1.5 acres for the rural transition zone, that's just based on a comparative look at other communities that have similar zones. You know, it might be 1.5 acres, it might be 2 acres, but it seems to be a reasonable size to accomplish that land use goal.
Okay, yeah. I do want answers. I'm not going to go through this quickly.
Mayor, can I throw in 1 or 2 comments real quick?
I'm sorry, you must have left when you got your turn.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much for the presentation. One thing I'd like you to do in the next draft is to give options, to give zones. Right now, you're saying this is what we recommend, this number, this number, this number. You need to give us a zone of, you know, this would be the best place to go. Here's the middle. Here's the bottom. You need to give us zones. You need to sit there and take everything that you're suggesting in this and put a millage rate next to it. And then total it down at the bottom, because that's the total cost of what you're asking us to do. And you're asking us to do a lot. And it's going to cost a lot for the people here, and they need to know that. So there's some pie in the sky kind of things here, and sometimes we just can't afford that. The new population of the city, it's going north. It's not here. It's going north. Did Winter Garden build a new city hall, or they just updated the one they had?
I believe they did. Isn't that right, Alan? They built a new city hall in Winter Garden.
They built a brand new one?
Yeah.
Brand new.
Okay. I think we need options with the city hall. I think we need to, if we built a new city hall up on 27, closer to where all the new developments are, and put it more central, I think that would be better for the town. I don't really believe that taking up valuable real estate down here in the historic part of the city for a brand new city hall is the best use of the money. I think we could find a building and renovate that building for a quarter of the cost of putting a new building in, so that should be an option for us. As far as new growth, we should be asking developers to bring their own water and sewer when they're thinking about growing someplace. They're taking over farms that have no infrastructure at all over there, and they're expecting us to do it all. Frankly, we can't be doing that. We can't be bankrolling all these brand new developments that way. They need to set up some way, maybe a CDC of a percentage of what they're going to use towards a new water plant or a new sewer plant, and add that to it. So we have to think outside the box. We can't just think about the impact fees. The impact fees are us bringing the pipe to the house. It's not supposed to be about, you know, the water plant. We're a small town, and we just can't afford to do those things. And we really need to have a more developed plan for Broad Street and Orange when we get it. If you want a walkable town, you need to make it walkable. You need to reduce the traffic on those 2 roads. You need to give proposals about taking the 2 lanes on either side down to 1 lane, by additional parking. And you need additional parking, and you would want to use one of those lanes as additional parking. And you'd have to have a study to sit there and say, this is the most amount of cars you can put on this lane is doing this. Because you don't want to take up land for a parking lot. We're not going to build a parking garage around here or anything like that. So to start off, you need to get parking down on those 2 roads. So you need to think about that in this big development plan of down here. And you definitely need to take the fronts of the historic buildings and preserve them, but maybe bring people in to say, hey, you can develop the back half of it. We don't need to keep the entire building if we keep the frontage of the historical part. Thank you.
Yep, great comments. And yes, I think the city could use a downtown master plan to guide that sort of growth, and considering the realignment of State Road 50 in that picture. Thank you so much.
This is outside of the scope of what you're supposed to be doing. Just say it's outside of the scope, okay? The first thing I would like to see is what's the population that we're looking at. The comp plan estimates Is it going to be 45,000 in 2020, 2032, or 2035, or 40, or 50? I know that, I believe, I won't say I know, I believe that our current one says 48,000, but we've already approved, 21,000 homes, times how many per home? And then add that to our 25,000, we're already close to 70,000. And I think that's very important because it shows how much stress is on the system. And that's where I come back to density. I'm not the big fan of density. I mean, all we do is continue for every 1,000 people to put 7 more people on staff and all that. I'm for less density and more margin, which is the commercial. It cost us, there's a very good study, by the way, you asked for it, that Avalon did for me with a economist that I think will be very eye-opening to you on what the cost of and what we get out of taxes and things like that and what we have to provide. It's a very good study. But I don't see any commercial in here, and I'm very, very disappointed because I think the conversation was around how do we commercialize 27, because that's the only way we take the burden of taxes off of our citizens is to get the commercial properties out there where they need to be. And because, just to quantify what my colleague said, with now, thank God, only 2,900 homes going into Bright Hill and 7,500 homes going into Villa City, there'll be more people out there than what we've got in the whole city right now. And we don't want them coming down 19 to pay their water bill. Civic centers, I mean, as far as places, community centers and stuff should be down here overlooking the lake. We don't need an office building down here overlooking the lake. Just my, I just put that in there for your consideration. I went through the strategic plan and I'm kind of taken back because I thought this was going to mimic that or at least utilize it. The strategic plan says 60% of the protected area is working agriculture, and now we're taking that down to 50. Is that correct?
50% of land in conservation. That's
only conservation.
It should be, let me ground truth that or clarify.
Okay.
50% is a combination of conservation and agriculture.
Okay.
It ends up being, if you look at it a little bit more detailed, 30% is around conservation, and
Okay.
then 20% of that is the agriculture.
Good to know, good to know.
I plan to go over that with you too, Carla, I caught that. But 60%, when we initially wrote the strategic plan, it did include water bodies. And we did receive a lot of feedback within the last few years or so, not related to this project necessarily, but of non-including water bodies because no one thought those are going to be developed anyway. And so you could understand that point.
I would challenge that and say put it back in, because if we're trying to get a rural designation, it's number of residences per acre. And if we're we need to get rural because we'll never have the capacity without that funding that we need. And we can't build a house on the lake, so it's conserved. So please revisit that. Strategic plan, I was taken back, and I really want you to examine that we haven't done that much as far as buying conservation land. I'm very sensitive because a year ago, we bought 750 acres. It was charged this last year. But why is that not considered? That's a big percentage of our overall city.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Please take a look at that. And in the strategic plan, it says when we buy this, we have to activate them. So I'd really like to see something about really define what a park is. Is a park wetlands? Is
Yes.
a park something you can walk through? Is a park, because we may not have 10 acres like Claremont, but we have a heck of a lot more lakes and stuff going through our city than they have out on Four Corners and everywhere else that are recreationally minded. And so 10 acres might be too big for the amount of land we have left, okay?
Yeah, those definitions will be included.
In our strategic plan, I don't know if it goes in here, but there's a charge to powering parts of the city on renewable energy sources. Is that something that we're going to do in the next, is this a 10-year plan?
10 and 20
Yeah,
years.
are we going to challenge that in the next 10-year plan? a lot of talk in the strategic plan about lodging and how, if we have a regional park, it's very important now because when people come from out of town, they're staying in Claremont. Claremont's getting that tax instead of us. So I'd like to see something in that. The Waterways Master Plan, have we gotten that done? Does that go in your whole thing, Waterways Master Plan? And then I'm really sensitive about agriculture, because if you can go back to, I don't know, let me see, 25, I think is 25. Right there, that's good. 26, it outlines it just as well. Where's agriculture on here? And then I don't try not to take it personally, but I go into the draft.
Well, I suppose agriculture's in the conservation goal there, even though I didn't realize.
Draft, thinking that might have been the answer. And agriculture is defined as where people can only go onto the property and visit and community gardens, and that's not all agriculture. As a matter of fact, some of us aren't permitted to let the public come on because they carry different funguses and stuff like that. So I would definitely, doesn't define agriculture at all, so I would take a look at that.
Will do.
The city parks, define a park, 24. I think we beat that to death, the 250. That'll be the most important thing on this slide because you're talking $50 to $60 million because that's another wastewater treatment plant beyond the one we're building. So that is huge. If we put this in this state thing, it really, really puts us in a corner. So I'd like to see proof on that 350 gallon per area use. I like the time chart that you had, but I'd like to see more milestones where we don't have to get together, but hey, this is the questions like we do at our meetings where all the questions are defined and staff or somebody answers those questions and sends them back to us so we're talking the same lingo and creating the same message. It would be very good for that. Population is huge. Do we have a population estimate for 10 years from now?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, it is just very preliminary because we're looking at some of the methodology that we employed and trying to make sure we get that accurate. Here we go. So we're looking at the high estimate for growth in Groveland based on American Community Survey and Bieber. So we're looking at probably by 2045, which is essentially the time frame of this plan, somewhere between 32 and 36,000 people. But again, that's very rough. So
we have what you use 3.1 people per house?
Yes.
Is that about what you do? Is 26, we have 60,000 approved entitlements. And so that's, P&Z is here. That's very big on your list, on how we accommodate that because that's not so many every year for the next 10 years based on right now we're at 25,000. That's about 1,000 people a year. It's about 300 homes a year, right? So let's make sure we all are in agreement on that. And then the survey, I'm glad Robin brought that up. We've determined on our new survey that it's not valid unless we have 200 people, the one that we launched last night, for the group. So how can we, and 200 was the minimum. It had to be more, but 200 had to be the minimum. How do we engage the public more in this ideation session to ask them, what they think about 35,000 people or 50,000 or 60,000? It would be really good for maybe we pay the person that's doing the other survey is our marketing person. Maybe we can ask her to advise us on how we can get more participation in the surveys. Whether it's standing out here with the board, I mean, I've done that before at Second Friday. You'll get more than you got right there standing. We're going, I don't care, go to door. I don't mind going door to door and asking people, what do you think? All they can do is slam it. And so again, I'll go back to, let's get a list and give us the milestones. The agriculture, let me get back to that. I'd really like to see less on let's go purchase lands and more on let's use the Rural and Family Protection Program with the state that will purchase the development rights, which means it's fine for us because it'll always be farmland. And if we can work with farmers to get that family in, average of $3,500 an acre versus $10,000, and work with the state in some kind of program to help those farmers out, that guarantees there'll always be farms, and that's an action that I think we have to take in order to meet our goal right there.
Great suggestion. Great suggestion.
Okay, and what's the final? Who says this is ready? It comes before who says it's ready for prime time? When will we see that? Because I see on the timeline we have 2 meetings with the council, and I just want to make sure, we always seem to be up against the wall, and we have to approve something, or else we're not going to make it. Is there a drop-dead date on this that we have to have it into the state, that we should be working back from to make sure that we have everything ready and whoever is going to approve it ready?
Yeah, I need to double check on that. I know that our contract is only through mid-April, so we're supposed to get to first reading by that time.
Final date,
Council
is there a
after your
final date?
contract's up, essentially?
What's that?
Our first reading at council is after the contract's up.
We'd be extending by 3 days to make that happen so that we could accommodate that process.
And so the second one is beyond your contract. But I'm more worried about us saying that we want this, it comes back and as happens, and we say that didn't hit the ball out of the park, we have to do another one, and then somebody says, well, we have to have this in by next week. What is the drop dead date on this when it has to be filed with the state? They have a contract deadline, but Dwayne, I mean, because I'm confused because I thought when we initiated this, we had a certain time frame to get it back to the state. When we went and said we're going to do this.
It was supposed to be in December, I believe, but we asked for an extension. They granted that extension, but here's an example. When we talk about the rural residential new land use category, that would be city initiated. We couldn't get that through the state approval process before we could adopt without doing the year. So it's a conditional extension, if you will.
So we've already extended this once. Is that what you're saying? And then extended it to when, or is it there's no date? They just said, okay, you can have forever? What is that? Whenever it's ready. Can you double check for us? I mean, we just had the same issue on another document.
We'll share the state's response with the council.
Okay. But I just want to know that we're not going to get our backs against the wall on that. The definition of conservation needs to be in here
It needs to be, yes.
because
Now that we've had
it's
this
interpreted
conversation.
a lot of different ways, and I really like to see that in there. And the affordable housing or these unit 4 units and things like that, I've seen some plans that have them like downtown. I would really like to have the P&Z discuss that closely because those units need to be out where the work is. And that's why it's important to find out if we're going to do the commercial corridor where Ford Center is, because people that are in affordable housing don't necessarily have 2 or 3 cars to go to different places. And I'll bring that back too with 35,000 people in transportation. Are we ever going to have any municipal transportation? having affordable housing and not having good municipal
There is
transportation?
a recommendation to explore the establishment of like a circulator route in the city to assist with mobility issues.
Okay, and just to get off the soapbox here, on the fire, set the 8 minutes, I'd really like to understand what the time response is in the city limits. Because I really believe that that's based on that we have a partnership with the county, and it's whoever is closer to us or Mineola or stuff like that that are outside of the city limits. And I'm all for the fire department going out to 27 and down the road, but I'm not going to build another fire station because the county can't respond. So I think that's very, very important to ask the question, what is the city limit as far as the response time?
I will get with the fire department leaders again to work with them on that.
Thank you so much. And just to reiterate, this next thing we see has to have the performance metrics, timeframes, and regulatory changes. In here, it says only for 1 year. I would expect that to roll out more than 1 year because this is a 10-year plan, and I would appreciate if we look at that.
I got a couple things, since I kept putting it off. I don't know if I'm alone in this, but reading this, I felt like it was overly vague. Like, I feel like we could have changed the logo on the top and said it's just about most cities around here. So the final draft's going to be a lot more specific, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, because, yeah. And then, like Chef brought up the diversifying the tax base and the 8 minutes for the fire department. I don't know if anybody's needed the fire department to show up, but the difference between doing CPR for 5 minutes and doing it for 8 minutes is drastic. I think most average response time is around 7 minutes, so extending it to 8 minutes is concerning anyway, unless it's to cover that extended service area. Like inside city limits, I do feel like it should be lower. And as everyone knows, I'm a huge supporter of our fire guys, so I almost would rather have that conversation with the chief and see what his thoughts were. And then on the fire flow for the wet, if you want to pull up the levels of service wet. There we go. I feel like that the 1,000 should still be the minimum, and then adjusted to zone to increase for the higher density areas with the higher, that need that. Because what you run into in rural areas often is the fire department becomes, their job is to protect people, not property. They will stand there and watch your house burn down as long as there's no one in it, because they don't have the ability to save property. They can prevent it from spreading to your neighbors, but that's not what they're there for. And I don't think that's the level of service that we're expecting here, or that we have here, so I don't think we want to lower that. And I feel like if we leave that door open, someone somewhere down the line will try to walk through it. So that's all.
Okay.
Okay. Now can we open it to the public?
Mr. Mayor, if there's any comments in the back, we have Ashley with a microphone. Encourage you all to share your comments and feedback based on the presentation.
Here we go.
Thank you, Alan Joyce. A couple comments regarding the concurrency plan, and that is hopefully you're going to tie it tightly to capital improvement program and also an approved budget so that there's not a guessing game going on with that, and tighten up the CO, certificate of occupancy, so that isn't issued. Your current plan, you can issue it up to 3 years after the infrastructure doesn't have to be done up to 3 years after the certificate of occupancy is issued. And a lot of other places, best practices don't allow that.
Yes, good point. I'll mention also there is a capital improvements section of this plan.
And then you mentioned the proportional sharing. We had that conversation last time. And have you looked also at Volusia County and Jacksonville? And the reason is that Jacksonville's mobility fee Volusia County does proportionate sharing transportation fees, and it's not to hit the developer with all the fees or the highest fees, it's to use the smartest fee to get the job done for what the city needs to be done. And then the other thing is the alignment of the future land use map. I don't know if you guys are dealing on maps, but just an example, because it's in the comp plan, but this is agriculture. It looks beautiful. It's on the existing land use map, but actually when you look at the city's future land use map, poof, agriculture's gone. So it's like, what happened? So it's like, I don't know if you guys are dealing with that, but when I hear comp plan, I think also maps, and bad things have happened with the maps. And last but not least, the response time for the fire department. Yeah, I don't know what the details are with that specific, but sudden cardiac arrest, if you're not there within 3 to 5 minutes, brain dead. So I don't know what their metrics are there and stuff, but something really to consider before you start going to 8-minute marks. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that.
I don't know if I can hold two things at one time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Ethel Merman, 21st Century. She is. A lot of the questions were answered about the parks and saying that maybe agriculture areas could be parks. And I'm from a farming family, and we would probably not like having people walking through our fields as a park. So the mayor did ask what the definition was, because I wasn't sure. 15 minutes from every resident seemed unreasonable to me, but is a park a bench? Like, can you walk down the street and you can sit down, and then you can walk somewhere else? So I was concerned about what is a park, and how much that would cost to have a park 15 minutes from every resident in the city. So that just seemed like a lot to me. And also with the agriculture, we need to make sure that we have food. It's healthier for us to be able to get food locally. And if we don't keep agriculture local, then we're still going to BJ's and getting food from Connecticut or something, which is fine. But we need to make sure that we keep agriculture, because it seems like Central Florida is just going to be a big city. And what I like about Groveland is that I can see lakes and trees, and I just don't want to see it all covered up, because we need to be able to have housing or whatever. And I just see so many apartment complexes going up, and there's just so much going on, traffic and people and that. But I do know that we need to have growth, and so the impact fees is important too. But are we going to have our impact fees so people come here and say, oh, well, I can go to Claremont and get it for less? So we need to make sure that what we charge people is going to be the same as somewhere else. And then my husband at the last meeting like this did mention how perhaps the impact fees could be split, so that it's not all at once, so that the developers of an apartment building or a shopping center or whatever can get some profit into their property, but they still owe the impact fees. But we don't want to make sure that they're saying, well, we're going to pay that later and you take care of it now, because we don't want to do that. So that's going to be a balancing act of making sure that what we charge and how we charge it, is that going to be comparative to another town where the developers that we want to come for growth, like you said, shopping, restaurants, and all that, will be compatible with people wanting to come here and build restaurants. And we were talking about a motel or something here, because you were talking at the meeting yesterday about how you wanted to have people coming, and how could we have 1,000 people coming or whatever. But if there's no place to stay, it's going to be harder to get people to want to have events in our town, in our city. So that was for that one there. Let's see, I got something else here. So that was good. A lot of the questions that I had were brought up, so I'll wait for that, because there was a lot in here that I did want to talk about. So kind of on the same page of what the city needs.
Thank you so much. And it is true, a lot of common themes are emerging. A lot of people feel similarly. Is there anybody else who wanted to make some comments or have questions?
Okay. You mentioned having the police and fires initially in the impact fees. How many buildings does it take to cover the assessments later on their taxes to cover the added police and so forth, so that you know once the impact fees are done, that you still have the money to pay for the added police and the fire and whatever? That needs to be considered, I think, too, when you put this all together.
For sure, and that's kind of what the fiscal impact analysis accomplishes, which is underway, I believe. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for your time and your thoughtful comments. Hopefully we've taken lots of good notes. And we look forward to bringing you the next stage of this, and to the mayor's point, bringing you materials along the way so that you have a chance to react as we go and know what's coming. We'll try to make that crystal clear going forward. Any other announcements, Alan?
So Alan Booker here, Senior Planner. Just a quick question, since we have City Council, P&Z, Strategic, CRA. In terms of the timeline, like this contract was originally very aggressive in the timeline, that we extended the timeline to put more teeth with our attorney, and we changed the contract, and that's also what led to we had delayed. But you're still talking this major undertaking under 7 to 8 months, and so now if you look at the new timeline, it's still very, in my eyes, it's very aggressive. And what I hear everybody wants to take a look at the draft, and assuming the Donna Harris at the state is okay with us potentially extending, I would like to know if potentially you would like to extend the contract, so maybe you can see the draft once, maybe a second time, so we really get it down, and everybody has a chance to look at it, not just skim it, but really read in deep, because as our mayor said in one of the early meetings, this is a key that's going to impact the next 20 years. It's a really, really big deal.
Very good point. Thanks for putting this together, but I would ask that you re-examine how we do the presentation. It started out with, let's see what the whole thing looks like first. I think there was a quote up there. But we need to see that 35,000, and I'd like to, we would probably like to see when those milestones hit, that we have to raise the labor force, how does those hit every 3 or 2 or however you want to do it. But for us to really examine it, we need to do that. And as far as the timeline is concerned, I hope, because we're dealing with other timelines that are constricted, we need to look on how we do the timelines. Because the council approves funding for a certain timeline and a certain job. And every time it gets extended, it's probably beyond what was originally asked for. So there's some sensitivity there. So let's look at the whole picture and see how we can back into it from the end to towards the beginning. Okay.
Thank you.
I think from planning and zoning's perspective, we don't like to rush into anything, especially when we're talking about what we decide today or advise on today is affecting our residents for the next 25 years. So, no, I don't think we should rush through. And maybe I don't know any of the details of the contract and the costs and all that, but I think we have a right to be able to review things thoroughly. And I have to agree with the councilwoman that this was a very vague draft. So we're what, 50% of the way into the contract period, and I have what I would imagine is pretty standard boilerplate, but perhaps I'm wrong. I don't know. But yeah, I want to see it again for sure. I think P&Z agrees. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, one last thing. can you really use our staff? I mean, I know they're strapped for time, but as a chef, there's 24 hours in a day. But when you pull up stuff like the EDUs and all this other stuff that really our staff should have already put a stamp on that it was okay. The same thing with transportation, our staff. What you should be presenting is what, as a group, as a team, our city wants, not here, you're over here and the consultant said that, because at the end of the day, somebody's got to own this plan and they need to be involved and need to put the stamp on it, so that that's the only fair way to do it. I really appreciate that.
At the end of the day, before this comes back as a first draft, you really need to see each department's fingerprints on this. I've told us, the senior staff, that's not just our department. This impacts all of our departments in terms of our levels of service and various infrastructure. Budgeting is impacted. To Alan's point, this is going to have a profound impact for years and decades to come. So we need to get it right. So before you see the draft come back, it's going to be shared with the public. I know our department's certainly going to have our fingerprints on it, but again, we need to make sure each department's included. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. We'll come back again.
I didn't remember reading it. So.
Two.